Hello guys, in Uganda things zinazidi kuchacha na kuharibika zaidi na zaidi. So before I start reacting on this channel, please remember to subscribe on this channel. Please subscribe so that we can proceed. Subscribe. 2 seconds for you to subscribe on this channel before we start reacting. Thank you for doing so. Muhoozi mwanawe na Museveni aamuru jeshi liende kwa mke wa Bobi Wine na limbake, limfanyie dhuluma zote. Kwa hakika angalia hizi video jinsi huyo dada ameweza kudhulumiwa, kisha nitakuja kwa uchambuzi rasmi.
And they were very provocative. One of them asked me how I could end up marrying a traitor of Uganda as if I'd never saw Nyakore to marry. Yesterday, the group that came to raid our home was a different group. They were so many, heavily armed, drunk, and they looked the same and spoke one language. They broke into the gate, the lower gate. Our askari was in a different corner, so he saw them and he called me. Our askari saw them and called me. I had already gone to bed. I was just preparing to read like one page of my Bible and then sleep. The askari called me and said, "These men are many and they are coming in this time." So in the moment, I got out of the bed, switched off the bed light, then tried to walk out of the bedroom and lock it, looking for a place to hide. But then I realized that was a wise thing to do. I opened the bedroom again, went in, opened the balcony room to make a video of at least some evidence of these people were coming in. I just shot a small snippet thing because already they had ladders and they were climbing to our veranda. So when I shot that, I locked the veranda door again, went in, sent the video to our son Solomon, and I asked him to let people know that we were under attack. Then I called our other son, who is also my brother-in-law, Dax, and I told him, it's finished. These people are coming in, definitely. So I walked out of the room, locked the door, and then went down the stairs. When I reached the stairs and looked in the window, there was this big group of men. Every window had like 10 men in it. And they said, "Open the door." They said it in Munyankore. I replied in Munyankore, I said I was not going to open. So I passed the stairs, went to the general bathroom, locked the door, and called our neighbor, one of our neighbors. And they said, "We'll have a problem here, let everybody know." Then I came out of the room. When I came out of the room, they were already coming into the sitting room. They had finished breaking everything. There were so many, very many. They went to all directions of the house. Ceiling, rooms, kitchen, outside in the compound, on the verandas, my bedroom, kids' bedrooms, bathrooms, everywhere. They were everywhere. They were very many. In that moment, they did not allow me to follow anybody where they were. One of them told me to give them my phone. He came and sat behind me, told me, "Give me your phone." I gave it to him from this angle. He put it in front of me and said, "Give me the password," in Runyankore. And I said back, "I'm not giving you the password." He said, "You're going to give me the password." And I said, "I'm not going to give you the password." He left, went outside on the veranda, came with other 4 men. So when he came back, he went in the same position where he was. He lifted me by the trousers. I was wearing 90 trousers and a shirt. He lifted me by the trousers, lifted me up, and then the one who was standing in front of me strangled me by the neck from the front. And then he told me, "Give me the password." And I told him in his face, "I will not give you the password." The one who was behind here pulled my shirt So now I was between two men. One was strangling me and one was pulling my shirt from there. And you know how the button chokes you here? So the button was choking me. I kicked the man who was in front of me. And when I kicked him in someplace very hurtful, and he walked away, then this one pulled me and all the buttons broke. Then he stayed with the shirt in his hands. So I walked across the room naked. Now, in that room there were so many men. Some of them just shied away and looked to the side. Some of them kept looking, and there was one sober one. And he said in Uganda, nedda, Mama Mudize, esati ye ayambale. It was on the floor. One of them picked it and said, wanike mikono oyambale sati. And I said, no, give me the shirt, I'll dress myself up. He gave it to me. In that moment, the other guy who took my phone and who had my shirt who tore my shirt in the beginning, came back and held me by my hair. It was plaited like this last night. He held me by my hair and pushed me all the way up to a pole across in the sitting room. And I hit my lip. And then he told me, bring the password. I said again, there's no password for you. Then he pulled me down on the floor and they sat on me. I felt as if 4 bodies sat on me. There was someone I think was overseeing everything. He told them, what's happening here? Leave her. Then they went. I sat on the floor, and in that moment I felt thirsty, I felt nauseous, I felt dizzy, I felt my body was confused. I asked for water. They brought me a glass of water. I asked for more water. They gave me another glass. And that was the last that I remember for that event. The next moment that I got to realize, I was on the veranda sleeping in my own vomit. The askari and the other boy organized and drove me to hospital.
So they left you in your house when you were unconscious?
They left me in my house. In my house or on the veranda, because when I realized I was outside on the veranda, sleeping in my own vomit. So all this while, they were asking me where my husband was. Where is your husband? I said, I don't know where he is. They asked me, did you think you would bring your brother here to run on Kampala MP and win? That's not how you come and conquer it. I don't have a brother that ran for any position. They kept asking the askari, where are the children? They beat him. Beat him here on the face. He has another cut on the head. They asked him where the children, he said he didn't know. They asked him where the basement was. Where is the basement? He said, I'm new here. I don't know if there is even a basement here. So they collected everything. Phones, laptops, electricity, chargers, AirPods, anything electrical. They took away our camera system. They went to the ceiling, picked it, broke everything down, left us in the dark. I went.
Do you think this man could have been sent by General Muhoozi?
General Muhoozi has given my husband an ultimatum of 48 hours. Sometime 3 days ago now. Okay, it's past 48 hours. And he told him to come out of the latrine if that's where he was hiding. Then he said, I am looking for you, and when I find you, I'll treat you the way they treat, was it rebels? Was it
Outlaws.
outlaws? Yes, outlaws. So, if someone threatens you to that extent, and they are in an office of power, and they're in control of the army and all the army outfit, how could you say they're not the one that saved those people?
What message do you have for your husband
Wherever he is, he should just do his thing. He shouldn't worry about me. As soon as the doctor says I am good to go, I am going back to our home, relax. I am going to be fine. I shouldn't be the reason you leave, you're hiding. You should come at your own timing and when you feel safe. Otherwise,
Fellow Ugandans and friends of Uganda all over the world, my name is Kyagulanyi Ssentamu Robert, also known as Bobi Wine, and today is the 24th of January 2026. It's exactly 8 days since I escaped from my own house following a raid that was carried out by the military and police at my home on the orders of Muhoozi Kainerugaba, Museveni's son, and the Chief of Defense Forces. We had gotten earlier intelligence from our friends within the army that he had issued orders to his men to come and harm me. So when we saw them jumping over our fence on the night of 16th January, I somehow escaped from my home and left. That night they didn't enter into our house. They stopped in the compound. 3 days ago, they once again jumped into our fence, hurled profanities to my wife, and threatened to break into my house. That was the second time. Now last night was the third time for them to raid us. They came in hundreds, according to my wife. They broke every door in our house, including those that were not locked. They took away all our documents, from academic documents, land title deeds, and all important documents. They took every gadget, phones, chargers. They took our internet system. They even took all the laptops, including children's school laptops. They also took away our CCTV camera system and destroyed anything that they could destroy, broke glass and cut even our chairs. They put my wife on gunpoint, demanding that she shows them where I was. They even forced her to remove the passwords from her phone and our laptops, but she refused. Well, these and many things that Museveni's regime is doing through his son and his other people are not signs of strength. These are signs of weakness. If Museveni claims that he won the election, why is he panicking? Why is he doing all manner of terrible things? Why is he harassing people? Why is he harassing me and my family? Those are signs of shame. Those are signs of illegitimacy. Now my message to you, fellow Ugandans, I am not in my home because I still want to be able to speak to you like I'm doing. I'm not in my home because my life is threatened. I take this opportunity, first of all, to thank the international community for the voices that they've raised, but also encourage them to keep an eye on Uganda, especially at this critical time. To you, fellow Ugandans, this is our country. All this is being done to intimidate us. They've abducted two of my deputy presidents, Lina Zedriga and Jole Tukamshaba. We don't know where they are. They've arrested Mwanga Chivumi, my deputy president in charge of Buganda region, and many other comrades, to sow fear in us. I encourage you to be strong, to be smart, to be creative. These people are not as strong as they purport, and indeed they are not as smart as they are. They failed to find me for 8 days. I also tell you that we must never give up. Uganda is our country and we must fight and liberate it. I will resurface at an appropriate time to forward our struggle. In the meantime, I'm not home because I'm trying to keep safe, I'm trying to keep alive, and I want to keep communicating to you. We shall overcome, we shall be free. People power, our power.
When the United States issues a formal warning about an election in a foreign country, it is never routine. It is not a press release written for decoration. It is a signal measured, deliberate, and serious. And this week, that signal was directed squarely at Uganda. This is not just another African election story buried in international headlines. What unfolded in Uganda after the January 15th, 2026 presidential election raises a much deeper question, one that Americans, especially those who have watched the Cold War, the War on Terror, and decades of U.S. foreign policy, will recognize immediately. What happens when a longtime security partner holds an election the world no longer trusts? According to official statements, the United States Department of State and the U.S. Embassy in Kampala expressed deep concern over alleged voter intimidation restrictions on media access, internet shutdowns, and post-election violence. These are not abstract accusations. They strike at the very foundation of democratic legitimacy, free choice, transparency, and public trust. Uganda's Electoral Commission declared the incumbent president, who has ruled since 1986, the winner with more than 71% of the vote. But the opposition led by Bobi Wine rejected the results outright, calling the process fraudulent and repressive. Reports of security deployments, tear gas arrests, and an internet blackout imposed days before voting only intensified fears that this election was controlled long before ballots were counted. For Americans watching from afar, this story matters for a reason many headlines fail to explain. Uganda is not isolated. It plays a central role in regional security, contributes troops to international peacekeeping missions, and has long been treated as a strategic ally by Western governments. When democratic standards erode in such a country, the consequences do not stop at its borders. So tonight we ask a simple but uncomfortable question. Can stability justify elections that citizens no longer believe in? And if democratic trust collapses in Uganda, what precedent does that set for East Africa and for America's role in defending democratic values worldwide? If you believe democracy is more than just a ceremony every 5 years, stay with us. And if you believe the truth matters more than political convenience, please subscribe and share this video. We need informed voices now more than ever. The presidential election held in Uganda on January 15, 2026, was presented by authorities as a routine democratic exercise. But almost immediately after polls closed, it became clear that this vote would not be treated as ordinary either at home or abroad. What followed was a sequence of official announcements, security actions, and international responses that transformed a national election into a regional concern. Uganda's Electoral Commission announced that the incumbent president, who has remained in power since 1986, had secured another term with approximately 71 to 72% of the vote. On paper, the margin appeared decisive. Yet within hours, opposition leaders rejected the outcome, arguing that the process itself had been compromised long before ballots were counted. The strongest and most visible challenge came from Bobi Wine, who publicly dismissed the results as fraudulent and accused the state of widespread irregularities, including ballot stuffing and harassment of electoral agents. As these claims circulated, attention shifted quickly beyond Uganda's borders. The United States Department of State issued a formal statement expressing deep concern over reports emerging from the country. The message was carefully worded but unmistakably firm. U.S. officials cited allegations of voter intimidation, restricted access for media, and violence surrounding the election period. These were not vague criticisms. They touched on specific practices that, in the view of Washington, undermined the credibility of the vote itself. At the same time, the U.S. Embassy in Kampala released a security advisory warning American citizens to exercise caution. The advisory referenced incidents of tear gas use and reported shootings during demonstrations that erupted after provisional results were announced. For a U.S. embassy to issue such guidance is significant. It signals that post-election tensions were not only politically serious, but potentially dangerous on the ground. The U.S. statement emphasized principles that American audiences know well: respect for human rights, freedom of the press, and adherence to the rule of law. Officials stressed that intimidation and suppression of voters erode public trust, and that transparent vote counting procedures are essential to maintaining confidence in any electoral outcome. In diplomatic language, the warning carried a clear implication: without transparency and accountability, legitimacy itself comes into question. This international response came against the backdrop of extraordinary measures taken inside Uganda. 2 days before polling day, the Uganda Communications Commission ordered a nationwide internet shutdown. Most online services, social media platforms, and messaging applications went dark. Authorities claimed the blackout was necessary to curb misinformation and maintain order. Critics, however, argued that cutting digital communication during an election crippled independent reporting and prevented citizens from sharing evidence of irregularities in real time. Meanwhile, security forces were visibly deployed across major cities and opposition strongholds, including the capital, Kampala. Armored vehicles, roadblocks, and heavily armed personnel contributed to what many residents described as an atmosphere of fear. Reports soon emerged of clashes between civilians and security forces, resulting in deaths and arrests. While exact figures remained disputed, the pattern of unrest reinforced concerns raised in the U.S. advisory. Together, these developments define the central event of Uganda's 2026 election, a contested victory announced under conditions of restricted communication, heavy security presence, and immediate international scrutiny. For observers in the United States, the story was no longer just about who won an election, but about whether the process itself met the basic standards that give elections meaning. As the official results settled in, Uganda's post-election environment shifted rapidly from uncertainty to confrontation. What had begun as a disputed vote now evolved into a tense national standoff, one marked by security crackdowns, personal risk for opposition figures, and growing international alarm. The most dramatic escalation unfolded around the opposition leadership. Bobi Wine and his party, the National Unity Platform, described an electoral environment they called openly repressive. According to his camp, security forces raided his residence as votes were still being tallied. Bobi Wine later stated that he narrowly escaped arrest during the operation, while members of his family were placed under what supporters described as de facto house arrest. Although police denied formally detaining him, they acknowledged a heavy security presence near his home, an admission that only intensified fears among supporters that state power was being used to suppress dissent. These developments unfolded against a broader backdrop of forceful state control. Security deployments remained heavy in urban centers and opposition strongholds, with patrols, checkpoints, and military vehicles becoming a common sight. For ordinary citizens, this was not a neutral show of order. It signaled risk. Reports circulated of tear gas being fired into crowds of protesters dispersed violently and of arrests carried out under vague accusations. While casualty figures remained contested, the atmosphere of fear was undeniable. Human rights organizations quickly began documenting what they described as a pattern rather than isolated incidents. Amnesty International reported cases of excessive force at campaign rallies and demonstrations, including the use of tear gas batons and pepper spray against largely peaceful crowds. The organization also verified arbitrary arrests of suspected opposition supporters, movement restrictions, and roadblocks designed to obstruct campaign activities. In some instances, security forces were reported to have deployed military vehicles not to protect voters, but to limit political mobility. International concern deepened when the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights echoed similar warnings. The UN office cited reports of arbitrary detentions, enforced disappearances of activists, and violent dispersals of gatherings. According to the UN, such actions created a troubling pre-election and post-election climate that risked infringing on fundamental rights and casting serious doubt on the legitimacy of the electoral process itself. Efforts to independently monitor events on the ground were further undermined in the days leading up to the vote. The Ugandan government ordered several local civil society organizations to halt operations, citing national security concerns. Among them were Chapter 4 Uganda and the Human Rights Network for Journalists. Uganda groups with long histories of documenting election conduct and rights violations. Their suspension removed key sources of independent verification at precisely the moment transparency mattered most. Journalists faced parallel obstacles. Reports emerged of intimidation, restricted movement, and limited access to polling areas and protest sites. Press freedom advocates warned that without safe and unfettered media coverage before, during, and after Election Day, the public would be left with an incomplete and potentially distorted picture of events. In a digital era where real-time reporting often provides accountability, these restrictions carried serious implications. From Washington's perspective, the situation crossed a critical threshold. The U.S. warning was no longer merely about procedural flaws. It reflected concern that unchecked repression could spiral into broader instability. For American policymakers, the calculus was familiar: when political competition is closed off and public trust collapses, unrest becomes not a possibility, but a probability. By this stage, Uganda's 2026 election had reached its climax not in celebration or reconciliation, but in confrontation. The conflict was no longer only between candidates, but between state authority and civic space itself. And for international observers, the central question sharpened: how far could repression go before the cost to legitimacy, stability, and international partnerships became impossible to ignore? As the immediate confrontation subsided, the deeper consequences of Uganda's disputed 2026 election began to surface. These consequences were not limited to political elites or opposition leaders. They reached into everyday civic life, reshaping how citizens viewed the state, the law, and the meaning of participation itself. For ordinary Ugandans, the most immediate impact was psychological. The combination of internet shutdowns, visible security deployments, and reports of arbitrary arrests created a climate of uncertainty and fear. In such an environment, civic engagement becomes a risk rather than a right. Citizens who might otherwise speak openly, attend meetings, or question authority often retreat into silence. Over time, this silence corrodes the relationship between the public and institutions meant to serve them. Civil society organizations felt this pressure acutely. The suspension of local rights groups in the days surrounding the election did more than halt monitoring activities. It sent a broader signal that independent scrutiny was unwelcome. When watchdog institutions are constrained or shut down, accountability weakens. Without independent verification, allegations of abuse become harder to confirm, and victims are left with fewer avenues for redress. The long-term effect is a narrowing of civic space where only state-approved narratives are allowed to circulate. Politically, the election reinforced an already entrenched imbalance of power. Uganda's leadership has been shaped by decades of constitutional and legal changes that gradually removed key safeguards, including age and term limits. These reforms consolidated executive authority while reducing the competitiveness of elections. Critics argue that such shifts undermine democratic accountability by making leadership renewal increasingly unlikely through peaceful means. This concentration of power carries consequences beyond election cycles. When political systems appear closed, opposition movements face a dilemma: accept marginalization or confront the state at significant personal risk. Both paths weaken democratic culture. Over time, elections risk becoming symbolic rituals rather than genuine contests of ideas and leadership. The impact is especially pronounced among Uganda's youth. With a large portion of the population under the age of 30, expectations for political inclusion and economic opportunity are high. When young voters perceive elections as predetermined or unfair, frustration builds. Some disengage entirely, losing faith in formal politics. Others turn to protests and street demonstrations, seeing them as the only remaining channels for expression. Both outcomes carry long-term risks for stability. From a governance perspective, persistent allegations of repression and electoral manipulation erode legitimacy. Legitimacy is not enforced by security forces alone. It depends on consent. When trust in institutions declines, governing becomes more difficult and costly. States must rely increasingly on coercion rather than consensus, creating a cycle that further alienates the population. These domestic consequences also shape Uganda's political future. A society operating under sustained pressure may appear stable on the surface, but beneath that surface lie unresolved grievances. History across many regions shows that such conditions can persist for years before erupting suddenly, often triggered by economic shocks, leadership transitions, or external pressures. In this sense, Uganda's 2026 election was not merely an isolated event. It marked another step in a longer trajectory of democratic contraction with tangible effects on civil liberties, political participation, and social cohesion. The question is no longer whether these consequences exist, but how long they can be managed before they reshape the country's political landscape in irreversible ways. From Washington's perspective, the crisis surrounding Uganda's 2026 election cannot be viewed in isolation. Uganda has long been treated as a strategic partner by the United States and its allies, particularly in matters of regional security and counterterrorism. That relationship is precisely why the U.S. response carried such weight and why the implications now extend far beyond Kampala. For decades, Uganda has played a central role in East African stability. It contributes troops to regional and international peacekeeping missions, most notably in Somalia, where Ugandan forces have been a cornerstone of efforts to contain extremist violence. Uganda has also been a recipient of Western security cooperation and development assistance built on the assumption that stability and partnership could coexist with gradual democratic progress. However, sustained democratic backsliding complicates that equation. When elections are widely perceived as lacking credibility, partnerships rooted in shared values come under strain. For American policymakers, this creates a familiar dilemma: how to balance immediate security interests with long-term commitments to democratic norms and human rights. Supporting a stable ally may seem pragmatic, but doing so without addressing governance concerns risks undermining the very principles the United States claims to defend. This tension is not lost on global observers. International investors, development agencies, and diplomatic partners closely monitor political risk. Elections marred by repression, communication blackouts, and allegations of violence send warning signals. Political uncertainty raises questions about predictability, rule of law, and the safety of long-term investments. Over time, such perceptions can affect economic cooperation just as deeply as formal sanctions. Regionally, Uganda's trajectory carries added significance. East Africa is watching closely. If a major regional power conducts elections under restrictive conditions without meaningful consequences, it may set an informal precedent. Other governments facing domestic pressure could interpret silence or limited criticism as permission to adopt similar measures. In this way, one contested election risks shaping norms far beyond national borders. For the United States, credibility is also at stake. American officials have emphasized that respect for human rights, freedom of the press, and transparent electoral processes are essential for legitimate governance. When these standards are challenged by allies, the response becomes a test of consistency. Strong words without follow-through can weaken Washington's influence, while heavy-handed actions risk destabilizing already fragile regions. At the same time, the global context has shifted. Competition for influence in Africa has intensified, with multiple external actors seeking deeper political, economic, and security ties. In such an environment, democratic values become part of a broader strategic contest. Countries that feel publicly pressured by Western partners may look elsewhere for support, reshaping alliances in ways that reduce U.S. leverage over time. Ultimately, the situation in Uganda forces a reckoning. It raises the question of whether long-standing partnerships can remain durable when democratic legitimacy erodes. It challenges policymakers to consider whether stability achieved through repression is sustainable or whether it merely postpones deeper instability. For American audiences, this is not an abstract foreign policy debate. It speaks directly to how the United States defines leadership in a changing world. If democratic norms are negotiable when strategic interests are involved, their meaning weakens everywhere. Uganda's contested election, therefore, is not just a national crisis. It is a mirror reflecting the difficult choices facing the international community and the cost of looking away. The warning issued by the United States following Uganda's disputed 2026 election is about far more than a single vote count. It is a signal that a country long regarded as a stable regional partner now stands at a political crossroads, one where choices made today will shape its future for years to come. When elections are conducted under conditions of intimidation, restricted communication, and alleged violence, the damage extends beyond immediate results. Trust is the first casualty. Without trust, democratic institutions lose their meaning, and leadership, no matter how firmly entrenched, faces a legitimacy deficit that cannot be resolved through security deployments alone. History has shown repeatedly that stability built on fear is fragile. It may endure for a time, but it rarely endures forever. For Uganda, the stakes are especially high. A youthful population is watching closely, weighing whether political participation still holds value. When young citizens conclude that ballots no longer matter, frustration does not disappear, it changes form. It can surface as disengagement, as protest, or as long-term instability that quietly undermines national cohesion. None of these outcomes serve Uganda's future, regardless of who holds power today. The implications also reach beyond national borders. Uganda plays a critical role in regional security and peacekeeping efforts. Prolonged political tension at home risks weakening its capacity to contribute to stability abroad. In East Africa, where political signals travel quickly, the normalization of restricted elections could set a dangerous precedent. What is tolerated once can be repeated elsewhere. For the United States, this moment tests credibility. American leaders have long argued that democratic norms, human rights, and the rule of law are essential foundations for lasting partnerships. When allies fall short, responses matter not only in words but in consistency. Silence weakens influence. Overreaction risks instability. Navigating that balance is difficult, but avoiding it altogether carries its own cost. At its core, this story forces a broader question, one that resonates far beyond Uganda. Can democratic values be selectively applied without losing their meaning? And can long-term stability truly exist where public trust has been eroded? For viewers watching from the United States and around the world, this is not simply a foreign crisis. It is a reminder that democracy is not self-sustaining. It depends on transparency, accountability, and the courage to confront uncomfortable truths, even when strategic interests are involved. If you believe elections should offer real choice, not just the appearance of it, this conversation matters. If you believe that stability without legitimacy is a temporary illusion, this story deserves attention. Please share this video if you think these issues should not be ignored. And subscribe if you believe the truth is more important than convenient silence.
Okay, let us proceed. Hope you have doing so and you have seen that painful story and painful news for real. I myself am doing reacting, but on this I can't agree with it. for real 100% sure. And if it is the first time to meet me, remember to subscribe on this channel, to give this channel a thumbs up of support with your subscribe on this channel, comment, and even share. Tap share so that this channel can grow as quick as possible. Yoweri Kaguta Museveni ambaye ni kiongozi wa kujichagua, allow me to use that language, ni kiongozi wa kujichagua, na amuru mwanawe ambaye ni Muhoozi ambaye anasimamia ulinzi na usalama kule Uganda kwamba Muhoozi amrisha jeshi lake na kuenda kwenye nyumba ya mke wa Bobi Wine ambaye ni mpinzani wa babaye not Donald Trump, Museveni. Na Museveni ndada huyo afanyiwa dhuluma for real, afanyiwa dhihaka, yani amedhalilishwa, kuelezwa ya kwamba atoe password kwenye simu yake, kisha alipokataa wakaanza kumdhulumu kivita. Kuna jeshi mmoja pale akamtoa hadi mavazi ya juu, akabaki vivyo hivyo, kisha kumpiga, kumchukulia, yani kumfanyia dhuluma. Lakini as we are talking now, huenda mambo yakazidi kuchemka na kuharibika zaidi nchini Uganda. Nikisema hivyo namaanisha nini? Nasema hivi, mambo yanazidi kuharibika kwa sababu Donald Trump ameingilia, na Donald Trump amesema kwamba yeye mwenyewe na jeshi lake litafika nchini Uganda ili kuhakikisha kwamba usalama umepatikana. Je, Donald Trump atakapofika Uganda, nini hasa kitaweza kufanyika? Ni yale makubwa ambayo yataweza kufanyika ni kwamba Muhoozi na babaye wataweza kutiwa mbaroni. Na ndiposa unaona ya kwamba as now kuna video zilitoka juzi jinsi kura walikuwa wanazipiga na jinsi mambo yalikuwa yanafanyika. Watu walikuwa wana mark kura, yani wana mark mahali ambapo Museveni yupo, na pia mambo kama hayo naweza sema ya kwamba yameleta changamoto na tumbo joto kwa Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. Kwa hakika tunavyoongea hivi maji yanazidi unga, kwa sababu Uganda kwa hakika si kuzuri na mambo yanazidi kuharibika. Before niendelee mengi, please kumbuka kusubscribe kwa hii channel ili tuweze kuendelea na tupate video kila kukicha. So kile ambacho Trump amesema ya kwamba Africa, the election of Africa inafanyika but is not good each and every time. Na nitazidi kusema hivyo, si Uganda peke yake bali Afrika nzima. Hakuna election ambayo inaweza fanyika, election ya usalama, election ambayo imeteuliwa mtu ama imechaguliwa mtu kwa njia iliyo ya haki. Kwa maana unaona ya kwamba Yoweri Kaguta Museveni ameangamiza watu, takriban watu, yani unaccountable people dying each and every time in Uganda. But yeye anasema tu ya kwamba yeye amepita, yeye yani anajipiga kifua, mwanawe ndio anaongea mbaya. Kuna juzi alitweet akisema ya kwamba I have killed 22 people and I hope the 23rd person will be Bobi Wine, na akawa amepea Bobi Wine masaa 24 aweze kujisalimisha. Atajisalimisha ni kosa lipi ambalo ameweza kulifanya? Hakuna kosa ambalo amelifanya, kwa maana si kwamba Bobi Wine alikosa, bali alisimama kwenye kinyang'anyiro cha uchaguzi wa president kule Uganda na akaweza kuteuliwa na watu, lakini kwa njia isiyofaa. Babake ambaye ni Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, babake na Muhoozi aweza kumdhulumu na kumnyang'anya. So kile ambacho naweza sema ni kwamba as for now Donald Trump ameingilia, na tazama jinsi Donald Trump anazungumza kwa haya maneno, au uone jinsi mambo yanazidi kuchemka. Uganda hayupo in peace, Uganda ipo mahali pabaya, na tuombe Mungu zaidi Uganda iweze kupona, kwa sababu Uganda ni jirani na tunasaidiana kwa vitu vingi tu, kwa vitu ambavyo I can say that tunategemeana, na hivi tunavyoongea hakuna kitu kinaingia na hakuna kitu kinatoka. So unapoona vitu kama hivyo, wengine wanatorokea huku kupata usalama wao, so vitu kama hivyo si vizuri zaidi. Na Trump amesema ya kwamba vikiwa vitaendelea jinsi anavitazamia yeye mwenyewe na jeshi lake, ataweza kuchukulia hatua. Tuombe kwamba isije ikafika hapo na tuweze kuombea taifa la jirani la Uganda, lakini naweza sema ya kwamba haki yako ni kitu cha maana sana. Na kabla hujafanya lolote, kumbuka kusubscribe, kulike na kushare ili video zetu ziweze kukupata mahali ulipo popote, ili upate yanayojiri ama yanayofanyika barani Afrika na nchini kwetu. Shukran kwa kunitazama, shukran kwa kuwa nami, na shukran kwa kusimama nami. Big up guys, forever you are. If it is the first time, I want to tell you that remember to subscribe, because sometimes you watch videos and you forget to subscribe. Do so that you can support this channel. This is MIKEAN'S K254. Thank you for staying with me. May God bless you until we meet again in another video.